Hello everyone, good you're watching. Today we're going to talk about the immune system. It's basic 7. The immune system is my favorite part about biology. It's really exciting. The way it works is beautifully put together, and I hope after a while, after you've seen this video, you're just as enthusiastic about this as I am, because I'm just going to show you how cool this is. So let's just dive into it. We're going to talk about the immune system, and the immune system protects the body against any substance. So not just any sickness or that kind of stuff, any substance which does not belong in your body. So even non-living things. And your immune system does that by attacking it or by just clearing it. You might have heard of the immune system. And just as many other parts of your body, the immune system is just made up of cells. Do you know which cells form the immune system? Think about that for yourself. If you want more time, you can pause the video. And for now, I will just show you the answer, because hopefully you know from basic 1, because we already briefly discovered this, that the immune system is actually your white blood cells. And that's very, very nice. Why? Because the white blood cells are in your blood. And why would that be a good thing? Well, you want to protect your body against any substance, but you don't want to protect your body in just your lungs, for example, or in just your throat. You want it to be everywhere. So if you put your immune system in the blood, well, it automatically travels throughout the entire body. Your entire circulation is secured by these white blood cells. So it's sort of a little army inside your own body, constantly patrolling every little part of your body. Every few centimeters, millimeters, micrometers even. Well, the white blood cells constantly patrol the body, and they search for anything unfamiliar, so something that does not belong in the body. So here you see a schematic depiction of white blood cells. And this is a bacterium. So now they look pretty okay, right? Now they are very cute, they don't do anything. But when they encounter a foreign pattern, so literally a pattern, so something they do not recognize, and in the case of a bacterium, that could be a cell wall, for example, because bacteria do have cell walls, but human cells do not have any cell wall at all. So as soon as a white blood cell encounters a cell wall, it knows that that is not part of your body. So it must be something foreign, so something that does not belong in your body. So they will just directly go into attack mode. And look at them now. Now they're cute, but once they see the foreign antigen, the foreign pattern, they look really, really angry. And you can even see their mouth opening a bit in a weird fashion. Of course, this is schematic. They don't really have mouths, but you can get the message across because they literally want to eat the bacterium. Yes, they do. So they get really crazy now. Well, important to know that white blood cells, once they do not encounter anything, they don't do anything. They're just sort of asleep. They're not doing anything. And white blood cells, they do recognize your own cells. Here you can see how cute they can look. And of course, white blood cells do not have actual eyes. So they just feel the outside surface of cells. And if they touch something familiar, then they just don't do anything. That's okay. So it's kind of like they are hugging every part of your body the entire day. So that's just their job. But once they feel some weird protein or cell wall they do not recognize, then they get crazy. So the white blood cells, as a main principle, attack everything which does not naturally occur in your own body. And when I say everything, I mean an antigen or a foreign body. Those are two key words which you need to know. So note this down if you have a notebook somewhere near you, and write down that an antigen or a foreign body is actually the part which is being attacked by a white blood cell. And that is everything which does not naturally occur in your body. And I mean literally everything. So not even only organisms or bacteria, also substances. But even if you have if you received an organ from an organ donor, for example, this is from a different person, and your own white blood cells do not recognize it anymore because it's not part of your own body, so they will still attack it. So this could cause massive problems, which is why there are some issues in organ donation in finding proper candidates for well, actually donating the organs, because the DNA of that person needs to be really similar so that your white blood cells will not attack it as much. This is also true for blood from other people. You can't just accept any blood. It needs to be the right type and that kind of stuff. We'll talk more about that in basic 10. So we'll come back to that later. For now, for today, we're going to look at pathogens. And pathogens in Dutch, they are ziekteverwekkers. So that's everything that could make you sick, and not necessarily just organisms, because there's one category within these pathogens which is not really a living thing. Let's look at this. All the four kinds of pathogens I want you to remember are viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. Well, schimmels in Dutch. Well, the fungi, they are not really mentioned in your book, and the parasites neither. So the main part we're going to focus on are the viruses and the bacteria. The viruses are actually not organisms. They are not living because they do not show any life characteristics of their own. So without a host, without a person or an animal to go in, they cannot do anything. They're not really alive. This is a really hot topic right now, right in the middle of this corona crisis, because the coronavirus is also a virus. What is a virus actually? You can see a schematic picture right here, and a virus has some DNA, and that DNA is just, well, hidden inside some sort of coat, and this outer coat is usually made up of a fatty membrane or some proteins. An antigen or a foreign body was the part that was attacked by your white blood cells. An antigen is not necessarily the entire pathogen itself, but also just a part of the pathogen. And in the case of viruses, they have these kind of suckers on the outside surface, and they really want to suck themselves onto a cell in your body. And once they can do that, once it fits, they can enter your cell. So the virus shows no characteristics of life without a host, but what it wants to do is it still wants to replicate itself, and it has DNA, but it just does not have the tools to multiply its own DNA. So it just borrows, well, it actually steals your tools. So how does he do that? It latches onto a cell. So it's with those suckers, it's really adhering to the cell, so it's sticking to it, and then it enters into the cell and it intrudes the host cell, and it takes over the nucleus. And as you know, the nucleus is the control center of the cell. So once a virus is inside the nucleus, it can actually control your cell, and it tells the cell to make more viruses. Just stop anything else, only make viruses. So your cell does not like that at all, and probably even dies because it can't make its own proteins anymore. Now it just needs to listen to what the virus has to say. Well, of course, you can imagine that this causes some major problems. So we need to do something about this. We don't want viruses to control our cells and take over the body and kill everything. So this is why your immune system is so important. And this is where your white blood cells kick in. We have two ways to kill a bacterium, and you will need to know both ways in this basic. The first one is enclosing a pathogen and then digesting it. So it's really eating it. Once it does that, it is bombarding it with toxic substances, well, without this part. So if you enclose and digest the pathogen, well, you're just throwing toxic substances at it and hope it will die and it will break apart in little pieces. If you bombard these pathogens, well, there are some problems with that, because it's so toxic that your white blood cells sometimes die themselves. And if the white blood cells die, the toxic substances leak out of the cell, and everything in the environment around it dies as well. So you get a huge inflammation happening, so ontsteking in Dutch, and it will cause a lot of pus. And pus is just the dead bacteria with the dead white blood cells and some dead cells around the infection. Okay, this is probably a lot to take in for now. So I'm just going to show you with some sort of animations in the hope that you can understand this. Well, here you can see a white blood cell, and we talked about this in basic 1 already, so hopefully you remember that here we have a capillary, so a little tiny blood vessel. Hopefully you know exactly what kind of blood vessel it is now. And well, in this blood vessel, there's a bacterium. And well, just outside of the blood vessel is a bacterium. Inside the blood vessel are just red blood cells, and every now and again also a white blood cell passes. And a white blood cell exactly knows where to go, because there are some warning molecules made by damaged cells, and they recognize the weird outer layer of a bacterium. They don't know this, and they want to kill it. So they're just going to engulf it and then digest it with toxic particles. So how does a white blood cell do this? To explain that, I'll need to show you something. So let me change my screen. Look, what do I have here? Well, some smartasses might think, well, it's a plastic bag filled with water. Yeah, okay, it's a plastic bag filled with water. But let's use your imagination, just for one time in your life. Just pretend this is a white blood cell, because this is actually what it would feel like, well, on a very tiny scale, of course. But this is how a white blood cell will behave, because in the blood, which is just water, well, this is also sort of watery. It just tends to be like a round sort of ball. But, well, your bacteria, well, not your bacteria, bacteria in your body don't always are in your circulation itself. Sometimes they are just in tissues around it, in your skin, for example. So what happens is, a white blood cell needs to be able to surpass any sort of blood vessel wall. So it needs to go out. This is why a white blood cell is kind of this stuff. So once I would drop it, it becomes a really useless, weak, flobby thing. This is actually what will happen with actual white blood cells as well, because then they're not in water anymore. So, but because they are so gooey and wobbly, they can just actually deform itself. They have no fixed shape. So if you have cells lining your blood vessel wall, they can actually just squeeze right through it by just deforming it themselves, and then they can go out. So this is actually how a white blood cell can go outside of your own blood cells. It's just attracted by the bacteria and surrounding tissues, and it goes searching for it to kill it. Okay, think about what I just showed you, and then look at these cells. Well, white blood cells can actually deform themselves. Look, they can really squeeze through the cell of not the cell wall, the blood vessel walls. And it's actually very useful that capillaries are just one cell layer thick, so they can easily pass through, and now they are in surrounding tissues capable of, well, opposing the enemy. Now they can attack the bacteria. So white blood cells are actually attracted to those pathogens. They actually do know where to go. And it sounds a bit crazy. Actually, it sounds that crazy that I'm just going to show you, because you won't believe me, I'm afraid. Well, and in this video, you can see what would happen. The needle, this is under the microscope, so it's and you can see on the needle tip there are some warning molecules which a foreign antigen or pathogen would also have. And look at the white blood cell, it can really deform itself. Now you can see how weird it behaves, and it is actually attracted by the needle. And you can even bully white blood cells by just let them follow the needle around. See how crazy this is? So they just know where to go, just based on the molecules on the outside surface of this needle. So it actually works the same for bacteria. So they are actually chased by your white blood cells. So you can imagine how scary that would be for a bacterium. So it is really like the little army in your body. If we look at the infection in chronicle order, let's put my screen away so that you can see it clearly. We can see here that there's a capillary, there's some tissue around it, the skin. In the outside world, there are a lot of dangerous pathogens, all that kind of stuff. And bacteria actually want to go inside your body. That's really pretty for them. It's 37 degrees, nice and warm, it's moist. They love it. But luckily we have your skin to protect you from the outside world. But imagine there's a splinter in your finger, for example. It pierces through your upper skin layers, and well, it just leaves a hole now. Now we have a wound. The protective upper layer of your skin is gone now, and the bacteria could easily enter your body. Well, because the body is so nice and warm, the bacteria love it there. They're starting to multiply like crazy. 2 get 4, 4 becomes 8, etc., etc. And the bacteria excrete all kinds of toxic waste product as, for example, a byproduct of respiration, for example, but also other stuff like byproducts from nutrients. Those waste products, once they accumulate in high levels, so in high concentration, so if there are a lot of those waste products, it becomes toxic, and that toxic to such an extent that it could damage your cells. So the damaged cells produce some warning molecules to just signal to the white blood cells, help, we need you, you need to come to our help. So the warning molecules are actually what attracts the white blood cells. You saw that in the previous video as well. So the white blood cells just know where to go because they leak into your circulation. So, well, it's just like a sort of Hansel and Gretel story with following the breadcrumbs. This is your white blood cell following the warning molecules to the site of infection. So the white blood cells, they squeeze out of your capillary, and now they are going to enclose the bacteria and digest it. So the bacteria is now inside of the white blood cell, and they really get bombarded with toxic substances. But like almost bombarded. You can almost see it as like an explosion, because now everything in the surroundings is damaged as well. The white blood cell dies, and the cells in your skin around it die as well. So there is a lot of collateral damage. And there are even more warning molecules because of that. And because there are more warning molecules, there are even more white blood cells attracted to it, causing more warning molecules, causing even more white blood cells. So you can imagine how powerful this response could be. So what actually happens is you have so many white blood cells and warning molecules that your blood vessels start to widen a bit, and the site of infection becomes a bit red. You can see that if you have a little wound in your finger, for example, that it becomes a bit red. This is called inflammation, ontsteking in Dutch. So the inflammation, well, it's not a really nice feeling. It hurts a bit, but this is because there are a lot of dead cells in the surroundings. Your blood vessel widens, and there is a lot of pus, which you need to know as a key term. So, just to summarize that, when an antigen enters your body, well, or a pathogen, you get an infection, and those white blood cells oppose this infection by just engulfing it, just digesting it, literally cutting it to pieces, or bombarding it with toxic, well, bubbles. And here you can see an actual picture of white blood cells under the microscope, and look at all those little bubbly things. Those are the toxic substances, like here you see them as well, the brown bubbles, the toxic substances that could dump onto the bacteria to kill them. If you have an infection, well, you can see that it's a bit swollen and red here. This is because of the inflammation, and this is why it hurts a bit. That's not because of the pathogen mainly, but also a bit because of what your white blood cells did. They're not that careful, actually. So white blood cells oppose the pathogens in two ways. The first one we saw now, digesting. Here you can see another picture of it, which really sums it up nicely. You see the bacteria entering the cell. Well, the toxic bubbles around it, they just get dumped onto it, and the bacteria is, well, torn to pieces. It's a really sad story for the bacteria. But for your body, well, it's great. We still live. Yay. That's what we want. The other way, I'm going to talk about that now, is producing antibodies. Antibodies fit exactly onto the antigens, so the proteins on the surface of really weird foreign cells, which your white blood cells do not recognize. Try to remember this well. Here you see a pathogen, oh, it's still in Dutch, pathogen, and the pathogen is attacked by antibodies. And on the pathogen, there are antigens, so little proteins on the surface which are attacked by white blood cells. The antigen is, in this case, this weird orange thingy. Now you need to remember this really well. The antigen is attacked by the antibody. So the antibody are these Y-shaped thingies, and the antigen is this orange stuff right there. And you're gonna mix this up. A lot of students often mix this up. So the antigen is part of the thing you want to attack, and the antibody is actually the savior. This is what your blood cells make to attack the blood cells. One specific antibody fits at exactly one specific antigen. This is really important to remember. Okay? So if you have a polio pathogen, for example, you make antibodies against it, you can clear it, you can attack it. But if you have a a flu, for example, which is another sort of virus, you need to make other antibodies because the other antibodies would just fit on that one specific pathogen, one specific antigen even, so even that part of that pathogen. So this should be one type of antibody, only sticks to one particular antigen. It's like a key into a lock. It fits exactly in this combination. So your cells need to determine exactly which antibody they need to produce. This is this is difficult work, you know. If you need to make a key for a lock and it needs to fit exactly, and you've never seen that lock before, so if a bacterium enters your body, you can imagine that your white blood cells have no idea what it is, and they need to make a structure which fits exactly onto it. So that takes some time. It could actually take a few days even. This is why a lot of the times if you encounter a pathogen for the first time, you get a bit sick because your body cannot really respond with antibodies yet, so it needs to learn how to fight it. So the first time fighting a new kind of pathogen is actually pretty hard for your body. But once you encounter a pathogen the second time, you will no longer be ill, because then the white blood cells not only digest the pathogen, but they can already make antibodies against it. Now they can directly do that. And the first time it takes a few days before they also start using this strategy. So remember, if a pathogen is entering your body, digestion is always a good way to oppose it. But producing antibodies is only possible when your white blood cells know how to make this. And the first time you encounter a pathogen, it could take a while. So this is why you get sick the first time you encounter that one specific pathogen. In the case of coronavirus, never has ever been in Europe, for example, or in the world. So no one knows how to make antibodies against coronavirus. So this is why everyone is expected to get sick if they get infected with coronavirus. But for some other viruses, like chickenpox, waterpokken in Dutch, many people encounter that. And they only get sick once. And if you get the virus into you again, we wouldn't even notice it. So the first infection, cells need to know what antibody could fit, and you get sick because they need to know how to make it, how it could fit. It will take a few days. You can see that schematically here, the first infection and the amount of antibodies. So this is a few days. I think around 3 days it usually takes, and then the antibodies start to be produced. You make some of the antibodies. But imagine that this chickenpox virus enters your body again. The second time, now it doesn't really take 3 days. You start producing antibodies directly. So you won't even notice that you've had the virus. Maybe the virus is inside of you right now, exactly at this time. But your body doesn't care anymore because you will become immune to it. We call it immune if you don't show any symptoms of the sickness at all anymore. So you will no longer get sick. You will no longer feel sick. You might have the pathogen, but you won't really feel it anymore because your white blood cells are so effective at opposing it. So let's look at this infection, how it would happen. So a virus comes into your body and it sticks to the surface of the cell and enters it. It's really scary. So the cell is really becoming sick. It's actually dying because it can't do its own things anymore. So the cell will die, but the virus will have multiplied itself, well, like hundreds, even thousands of times. So a lot of virus particles pop out of it. Well, if a white blood cell sees this, well, all the alarm bells ring and it starts to produce warning molecules so that even more white blood cells come to help. So there's a whole army. And, well, the other type of white blood cells which make the antibodies need to know exactly what to make. So this would take a bit longer, but once they know how to make it, they can produce the antibodies, and the antibodies are made, and wow, it's a huge fight. And what eventually happens is, look at this part of the screen. Let me show you. The virus is really encapsulated with antibodies. So even if it's a bacterium, it's the same way. So the antibodies will just stick to the surface. And as you know, this kind of proteins on the outside surface of the virus are used to suck onto other cells. But if you just block them with antibodies, the virus cannot enter anymore. And it also helps because now it's really easy to spot for all the other white blood cells. So they become very effective at eating it, actually. If you encounter a specific pathogen, you will develop natural immunity. You will become immune in a natural way because you did it yourself. Your own cells developed a way to oppose this pathogen. If you encounter it the second time, you won't get sick anymore. And this was the case with chickenpox, like I explained to you. And you will have a lasting immunity. You will be immune for the rest of your life. Some viruses you can get multiple times, like the flu, but that is because the flu is actually a very nasty one, because the flu is really good at manipulating its outer surface. So every once in a while, it just has a different surface on the outside. So the antibodies cannot stick to it anymore, and your white blood cells need to learn how it looks again. But that's just an exception to the rule. Not many pathogens know how to do this. And the chickenpox virus doesn't know that, for example. So you will just have this disease one time, and then you will be immune forever. There's also a way to be immune in an artificial way, artificial immunity. We can do this by vaccination. With a vaccination, you become immune. And of course, it is an artificial way because your body did not do it itself. What you actually did is you injected some parts of viruses or bacteria or weakened pathogens so that your white blood cells can actually feel it, try to familiarize with it. And once they recognize it, they can produce antibodies against it. So they don't really even fight an actual foe or opponent, because the pathogen is very weak, or it's just part of the pathogen. But you can still make immunity. So that's really great. In Dutch, we have the DKTP-prik, the diphtherie, kinkhoest, tetanus, polio. And a lot of children will get this for all these kinds of weird diseases. I want to make very clear that vaccination is not really dangerous. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, thinking that. But the main part of a vaccine is just weakened pathogens, and there's not that much toxic stuff in it. Well, nothing at all. Not in really high quantities. So this could really help you. I think this was it for today. I hope you understood it all. And otherwise, just watch it again, go back step by step, and write down the important keywords.